Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20th, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding two lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found: a white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert: both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4 9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, By reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrews sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his co-workers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sierra Jugan. Sierra Jugan was a bright and cheerful young woman who spread joy and laughter wherever she went. Her adventurous nature and ability to find humor in any situation made her a delight to be around, even when she made mistakes. As she entered high school, Sierra's confidence and enthusiasm only grew. She fearlessly tried out new experiences, including volleyball, and showed remarkable poise both on and off the court. After returning from a family vacation on July 19, 2016, Sierra was excited to start the new semester at the University of Toledo, where she had plans to study abroad. She had recently bought a new bike and was eager to take it for a spin. Her mom wanted to discuss her study abroad plans with her, but Sierra decided to visit her boyfriend Josh's house, which was 7.12 miles away beforehand. Sierra left her house in high spirits, wearing shorts and a tank top, and promised her mom she would be back by 10:05 p.m. However, when Josh tried to reach her later, her phone went straight to voicemail. Alarmed, Josh called Sierra's mom, who immediately sensed that something was wrong. Sierra's family, including her aunt and Josh, mounted a search effort to locate her after she went missing. They thoroughly searched the neighborhood, suspecting she might have been involved in an accident. Despite their efforts, they didn't find any clues or signs of Sierra's whereabouts. As time passed, Sierra's family became increasingly worried. Her mom eventually contacted the police, who arrived about an hour later. A concerned neighbor informed the family that County Road 6 was blocked off, and they rushed to the scene. There, they found a chaotic atmosphere and officers who wouldn't allow them to pass. The officers weren't able to provide any information, leaving Sierra's family in a state of panic. In desperation, they decided to seek help from the FBI. As the night wore on, Sierra's family was left to wonder what had happened to their daughter, unable to rest due to their growing concern. The next day, Sierra's mom and aunt started searching for her by calling hospitals, looking for any unidentified females. Although they didn't find anything, they got a promising lead from Detroit, Michigan. A young woman who looked a lot like Sierra was in the hospital after escaping from a moving vehicle with serious injuries. To confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sierra's family to describe any distinctive marks on her body. Sierra's mom mentioned a scar on her calf and her pierced belly button. The woman in the hospital seemed to match Sierra's description, giving the family hope that they had finally found her. However, their hopes were soon dashed when they discovered that the woman in the hospital was not Sierra after all. The family was devastated to learn that the person found wasn't Sierra, as they had pinned their hopes on it being her. Later that morning, police officers came to Sierra's house to update them on the previous night's events. One of the officers had discovered a disturbed cornfield near the area while parking his car. He noticed signs of a struggle inside the cornfield and found a motorcycle track. To avoid contaminating potential evidence, he retreated without touching anything. As he retreated, he caught a glimpse of something shiny that turned out to be Sierra's purple bike. Further investigation revealed several items at the scene, including male and female sunglasses, a bloody sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police believed that Sierra had likely been abducted from that location. Detectives investigating Sierra's disappearance interviewed her friends and family to learn more about her boyfriend, Josh. They found out that Sierra and Josh had been close friends since childhood, starting from when they were just 7 years old. As they grew older, their friendship turned into a romantic relationship in their first year of high school, and they became known for being a happy and adventurous couple. Skiing was one of their shared hobbies, and they would often go skiing together. After high school, Sierra went to the University of Toledo, while Josh attended Bowling Green. Despite the physical distance between them, they remained committed to each other and would often talk about getting married someday. However, Sierra wanted to focus on her education before settling down, showing how dedicated she was to her studies. Despite the challenges of being apart, their relationship remained strong and serious. On July 19th, detectives learned that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon. She left his house around 6:30 p.m. to return home, and Josh, concerned for her safety, accompanied her on his motorcycle for part of the way. However, after a few miles, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and let her ride her bike the rest of the way home alone. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways. Josh headed back on his motorcycle, while Sierra continued riding her bike. During the investigation into Sierra's disappearance, detectives found motorcycle tracks in the cornstalks near Sierra's bike. This discovery raised a key question: did these tracks come from Josh's motorcycle? The detectives couldn't ignore this potential connection and began investigating further to see if they could link Josh to the scene of Sierra's disappearance. They set up a command post to gather and analyze any relevant clues. A promising lead emerged quickly. A local resident came forward, saying he had found a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road on July 14th while driving. He picked it up and stored it in his truck. After learning about Sierra's disappearance, he examined the helmet more closely and discovered red stains that appeared to be blood. The helmet was found in the same general area where Sierra's bike was discovered in the cornfield. The detectives asked Josh about his motorcycle helmet, and to their relief, he produced it, confirming he had it with him. They also verified his alibi by speaking with his parents, like ruling him out as a suspect. Although visibly shaken, Sierra's family never considered Josh responsible for her disappearance. The detectives were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained helmet, recognizing the significance of DNA evidence. They sent the helmet to the crime lab for testing, anticipating a potential breakthrough. The detectives waited patiently for the results, hoping it would lead them closer to solving the case. The news of Sierra's disappearance spread quickly throughout the town, prompting the community to come together to search for her. Citizens joined forces, organizing search parties that scoured every possible area, searching for any clue that could lead to her whereabouts. As the townspeople worked tirelessly to bring Sierra home safely, they felt a strong sense of unity. To show their support, the community organized a candlelight vigil at the local high school. The atmosphere was emotional, filled with grief, hope, and determination. hundreds of people gathered, holding candles and sending their thoughts and prayers for Sierra's safe return. After 2 days of investigation, the police received a tip about a suspicious van seen speeding through the area. They suspected that Sierra might have been taken in the van, possibly falling victim to sex trafficking. The police received a tip about a license plate number linked to a van that was speeding through the area where Sierra went missing. They interviewed the van's owner, who explained that he had sped up because another vehicle had suddenly approached from behind, possibly a family member searching for Sierra. This had startled him, causing him to quickly leave the area, which may have given the impression that he was involved in Sierra's disappearance. After 48 hours of investigation, the police had no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. As each day passed, her family's hopes of finding her alive were dwindling. The police continued their door-to-door search, which eventually led them to a nearby farm that belonged to James Worley. The farm had several structures, including a house, a trailer, and a large barn. The police questioned James Worley about the day Sierra disappeared, hoping to get any information that could help them find her. To the detective's surprise, James revealed that he had been riding his motorcycle on the day Sierra went missing. However, he claimed that his bike had broken down, causing him to lose some items, including a screwdriver and his helmet. The detectives were stunned, as these were the same items found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. This revelation raised significant suspicions about James. The detectives were determined to investigate further and questioned James about Sierra's disappearance. They noticed scratches on his face, indicating that he had been involved in a struggle. This discovery only increased their suspicions and raised more questions. They wondered if the scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. The detectives decided to investigate James's background, hoping to uncover relevant information. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. James had a dark criminal history, including a previous attempt to abduct a 26-year-old woman named Robin Garder on July 4, 1989. On that day, Robin was getting ready for a neighborhood picnic when she decided to go for a bike ride. As she rode, she became thirsty and contemplated returning home. However, before she could make that decision, a car approached from behind and collided with her bike. The impact sent Robin flying into a nearby ditch. The driver, who later turned out to be James, approached Robin and asked if she was okay. However, he soon revealed sinister intentions, striking her in the back of the head and threatening her life with a screwdriver. He forced her into his car, attempting to handcuff her. Robin resisted fiercely, preventing him from securing the second cuff. Despite being on the verge of losing consciousness, Robin continued to fight. She screamed for help, but her cries were drowned out by the desolate cornfields. Just as she was about to give up, she heard a motorcycle approaching. The rider noticed her distress and stopped to help. Robin escaped by climbing onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor behind. The motorcyclist drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Her mother called the police and an ambulance, and Robin was rushed to the hospital. The motorcyclist then led the police back to the scene, where they found James still present with his car. James cooperated fully, providing identification, but his account of the events differed significantly from the truth. He denied any intention of abducting Robin, but the detectives were not convinced. James Worley claimed that he had to restrain Robin with handcuffs after a bike accident to prevent her from harming herself, not to harm her. He said he was concerned about her well-being and wanted to get her help. However, James had a dark past. In 1989, he was arrested for trying to kidnap Robin and was found guilty, receiving a 6 to 10-year sentence. Due to good behavior, he was released after 3 years. When Robin learned of his release, she was terrified, fearing he might harm her again. The police had reason to suspect James in Sierra's disappearance, given his criminal history. They obtained a search warrant for his residence, which he shared with his mother. Initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but upon inspecting his expansive backyard, They found a suspicious barn. Inside the barn, they discovered a small green crate containing labeled and sealed bags of women's clothing, including a pair of bloody purple panties. The detectives also found a hidden freezer, air mattress with stains, zip ties, duct tape, and handcuffs. James claimed the items were for a porn business, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The police collected all the items for DNA testing, and the evidence led to James's arrest for Sierra's murder. The investigation continued, with the police searching every inch of James's property, including a pond, which they drained to search for evidence. The question on everyone's mind was, where was Sierra's body? The detectives expanded their investigation to the attic's front insulation and neighboring properties, recognizing that evidence might have been dispersed beyond James's property. They thoroughly explored all leads. A farmer reported a suspicious area in his field where the corn seemed matted down, with a nearby mound of dirt that resembled a potential grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened due to the ongoing search for Sierra, so he quickly contacted the police. The police responded promptly, noticing a fresh pile of dirt that fueled their suspicions. They carefully processed the area, avoiding potential evidence disturbance. Despite their thorough search, no clues were found regarding Sierra's whereabouts. The detectives then searched adjacent farms using drones and helicopters to cover more ground. They soon discovered a mound of dirt with freshly matted corn, with trained dogs indicating a potential crime scene. As they dug, they made a grim discovery: human remains, later confirmed to be Sierra's body. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to handcuffs. An object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway, which ultimately led to her death. The devastating news was delivered to the Sierra family that night. The family was overwhelmed with grief, and their sorrow was palpable. 1 month after the abduction and murder, James Worley was indicted on 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley stood trial, pleading not guilty despite overwhelming evidence. The state presented a terrifying story over 8 intense days, and the jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Worley guilty on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The sentence imposed was death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child of the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family moved to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, including a job as a life administrator at State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to disability claims related to leg and back pain. Despite some past legal issues, including 2 charges of forgery, Pam's acquaintances would never have suspected her of being capable of murder. However, on August 16, 2016, Pam shot and killed Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with physical and mental disabilities since a 2005 car accident. Pam claimed that Louis had attacked her with a knife after jumping out of a passing vehicle, and that she had defended herself by slapping the knife away and then shooting him 5 times with her Ruger LCR, which she retrieved from her nightstand. However, this account of events seems suspicious, and it is uncertain what really happened that day. Pam accused Louis of instructing her to drive him to the bank to withdraw money belonging to Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. According to Pam, Louis became agitated and excited, saying, "We're going to the bank. We're getting Russ's money." However, evidence later revealed that Louis's true intention was to have Louis Gumpenberger attack and kill Pam. A handwritten note found at the crime scene contained instructions for Gumpenberger. First, he was to obtain Russ's money from Pam's apartment. Next, he was to kill Pam and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The note included gruesome details, such as ensuring the knife was left sticking out of Pam's neck. The perpetrator was willing to pay Gumpenberger a large sum of money for carrying out this heinous act. Pam Hupp was arrested for the murder of Lou Gumenberger. However, a question arose. Was Gumenberger a hired assassin, or did Pam manipulate him, using a mentally disabled man as a scapegoat? The truth began to unravel when Pam went to the O'Fallon Police Department voluntarily. During her interview, Pam asked if it would be recorded, mentioning that she normally appeared with Chris Hayes, a KTVI news reporter. She even blamed Hayes for attracting criminals through his reporting. Pam had a history of pretending to be Kathy, a producer of an NBC TV show. According to the O'Fallon police chief and the St. Charles County prosecutor, Pam used this persona to lure Gumenberger into her home, where she tricked him into recreating a 911 call, providing a cover for the brutal crime she was about to commit. After killing Gumenberger, Pam Hupp planted evidence to incriminate herself, including writing a note found on his body. The police had a strong case against her due to the overwhelming evidence they uncovered. They found $9 bills on Gumenberger's body, which Pam had placed there. The 10th $9 bill was later discovered in her dresser, and its serial number matched 3 of the $100 bills, also found on Gumenberger. Pam Hupp was arrested on August 23, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she requested to use the restroom on the day of her arrest, she attempted to commit suicide by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she did not succeed. On January 30, 2017, Pam appeared in court for the first time. The prosecutor, Phil Groyne, argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. A grand jury convicted her of all charges. In December 2016, her bail was set at $2 million. Pam's trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to pursue the death penalty. The prosecutor's reasoning was that Pam had seemingly chosen her victim, Gumenberger, at random. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, which allowed her to plead guilty while maintaining her innocence. This move nullified the death penalty charge and led to a jury trial being cancelled. As a result, Pam was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. Following her sentencing, she called her then-husband Matt Hupp and explained that she had confessed to killing Louis Gumenberger to avoid putting their family through a lengthy and distressing trial. During the trial, disturbing facts about Pam's past came to light, shocking the police, judges, and the public. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Farrier could be presented in court. This ruling led to the reopening of the Betsy Farrier case. Betsy, born Elizabeth Farrier, worked with Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator and lived in Troy, Missouri, with her husband Russ Farrier and 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Betsy was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. In October 2011, she discovered that the cancer had spread to her liver and she only had a few months left to live. Sadly, she passed away on December 22, 2011. Before her death, Betsy changed the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to Pam Huff, without informing her husband or daughters. Pam claimed that Betsy had instructed her to set up a trust fund for her daughters, but later alleged that Betsy wanted her to keep the money because they had a romantic relationship. Betsy's daughters took Pam to court in 2014, trying to reclaim their mother's life insurance fund. However, their case was dismissed in 2016. In the same year, Russ, Betsy's husband, sued State Farm. On December 27, 2011, just 5 days after making Pam the beneficiary of her life insurance policy, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Sitman Cancer Center. Weakened from the treatment, she went to her mother's house, where it was agreed that Russ would pick her up, or she would stay overnight. However, Pam unexpectedly showed up and insisted on driving Betsy home, claiming to have dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter reported that her mother didn't answer her call at around 7:21 p.m. Later, at 9:40 p.m., Russ, Betsy's husband, desperately called 911 to report that his wife had taken her own life. However, Russ had been at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterward, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before returning home. When the emergency responders arrived about 10 minutes after Russ's call, they quickly realized that Betsy's death was not a suicide. Her body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a deep cut on her wrist. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints around the entrance of the house. The investigation determined that Betsy died between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Suspicion immediately fell on Russ Farrier, who became the prime suspect. The authorities believed he had a motive, as his wife had refused to give him access to $150,000. Russ was arrested and charged with his wife's murder, while the real killer remained at large. Russ Farrier was arrested the day after Betsy's death. He became the prime suspect due to his 911 call, in which he claimed her death was a suicide. However, a glance at the body immediately ruled out this possibility. Additionally, a pair of blood-stained slippers were discovered in his closet, incriminating evidence against him. Russ was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in court in January 2012, just a day after his wife's funeral. The investigation revealed more damning evidence against Russ. He performed poorly on a polygraph test, leading police to regard his behavior as suspicious and erratic. Furthermore, at Pam's request, the police searched Betsy's laptop and found a disturbing Word document in which she expressed her fear of losing her life at the hands of her husband. Russ was held on a $250,000 bail, which he couldn't afford, so he was kept in county jail until his trial on November 18, 2013. During police questioning, Pam revealed that Russ had a history of violence, heavy drinking, and had previously threatened Betsy, making it easy to suspect him of the murder. The prosecution argued that Russ had a strong motive to kill his wife. She had received a large sum of $150,000 for her friend, bypassing him in the process. According to Judge Christina Menem, this motive was enough to implicate Russ. At the trial, Russ's lawyer, Joel Schwartz, defended his client's innocence. Schwartz claimed that Russ had spent most of the night with friends who corroborated his alibi. Additionally, Russ had purchased food at a store that evening, which made it physically impossible for him to stab his wife 55 times within the given time frame. Furthermore, there were no bloodstains on his clothes or body. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends might have been involved in the crime and had lied about his whereabouts that night. The prosecutor suggested that Russ's friends had accompanied him to buy food at ABY and stage an alibi. The presiding judge, Christina Menem, refused to allow Joel Schwartz to present crucial evidence that implicated Pam as an alternative suspect. This evidence included phone records showing Pam was still near Betsy's apartment 30 minutes after she claimed to have left, as well as the fact that Betsy had made Parry of a $150,000 life insurance policy just 5 days before her death. Despite Pam having a clear motive, the judge chose to ignore it. In a closed hearing, Pam claimed to have put $100,000 of the insurance money into a trust fund for Betsy's daughters. However, in a later civil deposition, she admitted to keeping the money for herself, stating that she didn't want her daughters, mother, or sisters to have it. Meanwhile, Detective Mike Merkel of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office reported that a crime scene camera had malfunctioned, resulting in important photographs being unable to be developed. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Russ was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action in November 2013. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 30 years. Before Farrier's second trial, Attorney Schwartz finally obtained the photos that showed no blood trail. To this day, I've tried to identify who in the prosecutor's office sent me those photos, but I've been unsuccessful. Fox 2 News was present in the courtroom when Schwartz dramatically revealed that he had uncovered evidence that police and prosecutors had been hiding. After this, Russ was transferred to the Jefferson City Correctional Center, a welcome development for Pam's sister Betsy. During the trial, Russ's wife testified that he had once pressed a pillow against her face, whispering, "This is what it feels like to die," because she had removed him from her insurance policy. Schwartz pointed out that this story originally came from Pam, but the judge ignored this. Throughout the trial, Russ's friends were falsely accused of being accessories to murder, thanks to the prosecutor's closing speech. Fortunately, no charges were brought against them, even though Russ spent nearly 4 years in prison. In February 2015, attorney Joel Schwartz appealed Russ's conviction. However, back in 2013, Judge Christina Menem had already rejected Schwartz's request to review the case. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch revisited the case, uncovering some suspicious facts about Betsy's death and her true killer. Their investigation found that Pam Hupp had given contradictory statements to the police, including a false claim that she had left the Farrier residence immediately after dropping Betsy off. The Farrier murder case was marred by controversy and deceit. A police officer recalled being shocked that nobody suspected Pam, with everyone focusing on Russ instead. A 911 operator testified that Russ seemed genuinely shocked and agitated during their call. However, 2 jurors revealed that crucial information had been withheld from them, raising questions about why the sheriff's department would deliberately hide evidence that favored Russ. The media uncovered a disturbing web of relationships between the prosecuting attorney, ASI, and key figures in the case, including the captain of investigations and a lead investigator. This information led to Russ's retrial in February 2015. The Missouri Court of Appeal transferred the case back to the 45th Circuit Court, where a new judge, Stephen R., took over. He granted a new bench trial due to new evidence and released Russ on bond pending the trial. During the retrial, Russ was allowed to present incriminating evidence against Pam. Some police officers admitted that Pam had told them she saw Russ with another man in a car while she was dropping off Betsy. The CSI agent who handled the crime scene believed that Russ's blood-stained slippers were a setup, and that the blood stain was not from stepping in blood. Russ was acquitted of all charges and released on November 7, 2015. He later filed a lawsuit against ASI and 3 deputy sheriffs for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating evidence. In 2020, he was awarded a $2 million settlement. The case also led to repercussions for the officials involved. ASI faced a bar complaint, although it was rejected. She later announced that she was willing to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Lincoln County Commissioner to review her conduct. Judge Christina Menem was suspended for misconduct in a different case and was voted out of office in 2018 for her role in the Farrier murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed a new attorney, Mike Wood, who reopened the Betsy Farrier murder case. He confessed that the wrongful conviction of Russ had inspired him to take the job. Pam was eventually interrogated as a suspect in the murder and was charged with first-degree murder. The new prosecutor, Wood, sought the death penalty due to the heinousness of the crime. Betsy Farrier was brutally murdered, stabbed 55 times, and her wrist was almost completely severed. Detective Mike Wood condemned the act as animalistic and charged Pam Hupp with the crime. Wood had strong evidence against Pam, including a $150,000 life insurance policy that named her as the beneficiary just days before Betsy's death. Pam had promised to put the money in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter, but instead kept it for herself, claiming that Betsy had wanted her to have it. In an interview, Pam claimed that she and Betsy were lovers, but Wood believed she was lying. Pam had also loaned her son $120,000 from her company in 2021, contradicting her earlier claims. Wood was convinced that Pam murdered Betsy by stabbing her with a kitchen knife while she slept on the sofa. He believed Pam tried to make it look like a domestic violence incident, by walking around the room with socks on. The evidence against Pam included a text message she sent to Betsy's phone at 7:20 p.m. claiming she was home, but her call records showed she was still at the Faria residence. The fact that Betsy was found lying on her side suggested to Wood that she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty of the crime, but her trial was delayed multiple times due to her attorney's death and other issues. Finally, in 2023, the trial was scheduled to start in 2025. Wood was not only determined to bring Pam to justice, but also criticized the Lincoln County prosecutors for mismanaging the case and showing bias against Russ Faria, Betsy's husband. He pointed out a 2015 destruction order that could have led to the destruction of evidence, which would have made it impossible for Russ to be released from. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Anna Repkina. Anna Alexieva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music, and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children, and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016, when her high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Anna met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him, despite the physical distance between them. Those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor, who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, she had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport, and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips, and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house, and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival, as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William and, as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew, and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle, sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick, but that was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, Michelle had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone, and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Ali Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity, as there was no identification found with her body, and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon, but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's statement. Following Anna's death, William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts, and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp, offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle, but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates, and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March, when Anna, mistakenly, posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée, or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering, but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store, not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the Alk General Store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, Michelle was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019, with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an Alon car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Melissa, who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a light-hearted family comment, even if it was a bit extreme. She acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held onto it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail, where Anna's life was tragically cut short, to pay their respects to her memory. Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored. The prosecutor, Amy Matsko, stated, "Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lacey Peterson. Lacey Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis, but her parents divorced when she and her older brother Brent were still young. After the divorce, Lacey's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer, who became a father figure to her and played a significant role in her upbringing. Lacey was a cheerful and outgoing person with an infectious smile and bubbly nature. She loved talking to people and was always eager to engage in conversations, which made her a natural attention seeker. She thrived in social situations and was known for her ability to light up a room with her presence. Growing up on a dairy farm, Lacey developed a strong connection with nature. She spent much of her childhood exploring the outdoors and enjoying the beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother, which became a source of joy and fulfillment for both of them. Lacey's love for gardening would later influence her interests and career choices as an adult. Lacey was a cheerleader at Thomas Downey High School, which was a great fit for her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a strong impression on her school and became the ideal cheerleader. After graduating, Lacey attended California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture due to her interest in plants and wildlife. Lacey frequently visited a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friend. Lacey was immediately attracted to Scott and was smitten. She took the initiative and gave Scott her phone number. Scott quickly reached out, and they surprisingly hit it off during their first conversation. Scott then asked Lacey on their first date, a deep-sea fishing trip. However, things didn't go as planned for Lacey, who ended up getting seasick. After a rocky start, Lacey and Scott's relationship blossomed, and they eventually decided to live together. Before meeting Lacey, Scott had aspirations to become a professional golfer, but as their relationship progressed, his focus shifted, and he chose to pursue a career in business instead. Lacey graduated from Cal Poly in 1997, and Scott followed suit the next year. This milestone marked the beginning of a new era in their lives, full of promise and potential. On August 9, 1997, the couple tied the knot in Isla Valley, San Luis Obispo County. The beautiful resort setting provided a stunning backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by friends and family, they celebrated their love and solidified their commitment to each other. After getting married, Lacey and Scott embarked on a new business venture, opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. The Shack, owned by Lacey and Scott, started off slowly but eventually attracted a steady stream of customers, with weekends being particularly busy. After several successful years, the couple decided to sell the bar in 2000, seeking new opportunities despite its stable income. Following the sale, they moved to Lacey's hometown of Modesto, California, and purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. Lacey took on a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. Lacey devoted herself to supporting Scott, taking care of the home, cooking, and cleaning. She made sure their home was always warm and inviting. In 2002, the couple received exciting news. Lacey was pregnant, and they were expecting a baby. Lacey and Scott were expecting a baby boy, with a due date set for February 10, 2003. They had already chosen the name Connor for their unborn child. On December 24, 2002, Scott stated that he left their house at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. Scott said he left Lacey at home on Christmas Eve morning with a busy day ahead of her. She was planning to watch a Martha Stewart show, clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and walk their dog, Mackenzie, at the park. However, one of their neighbors found Mackenzie wandering outside their home around 10:30 a.m. and returned the dog to their backyard. When Scott came home from fishing that afternoon, he said the house was empty, with Mackenzie in the yard, but no sign of Lacey. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott claimed he showered and washed his dirty fishing clothes as soon as he got home. After his shower, Scott realized Lacey was missing and became concerned. He called her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron, but they hadn't heard from her all day and were worried about her safety. As the day went on and Lacey remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police how urgent it was to find Lacey, who was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police then questioned Scott about his whereabouts and activities on the day Lassie vanished. Scott told police he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles from his home in Modesto, where he lived with his pregnant wife Lassie. However, from the start, police suspected foul play in Lassie's disappearance. Initially, police didn't treat Lassie's case as suspicious after Scott and his mother-in-law filed a missing person report. Lacey's family defended Scott, and the couple seemed perfect, making it hard to imagine Scott harming his wife. As the investigation continued, police grew suspicious of Scott. About a month after Lacey vanished, they made a stunning discovery. Scott had 2 secret affairs and a long-term relationship with Amber Fry, who contacted police on December 30th, 2002, after learning Scott was a suspect in Lassie's disappearance. Amber said she met Scott on November 20th, 2002, and thought he was single. 2 weeks before Lacey's disappearance, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. This revelation raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if Scott had already planned to kill his pregnant wife. To gather evidence, the police asked Amber to make a recorded phone call to Scott, hoping to capture a potential confession. The police informed Lassie's family about Scott's infidelities, and it was when they showed Lassie's mother a photo of Scott and Amber together that she became convinced of his guilt. The search for Lassie was highly comprehensive due to the involvement of the police, her loved ones, and numerous volunteers. In the first 2 days alone, more than 900 people participated in the search efforts. During a press conference, a police officer working on Lassie's case raised concerns that she may not have left her house voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Lassie's disappearance sparked widespread media attention, with the tragic and intriguing tale of a beautiful young woman vanishing from her home on Christmas Eve, captivating the public's imagination. As the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance, the spotlight on Lassie's case intensified. When Lassie Peterson vanished on December 24, 2002, a $25,000 reward was initially offered for information leading to her safe return. As the investigation yielded no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to boost awareness and gather more information. To keep Lassie's case in the public eye, posters were prominently displayed in Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to spread the word. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in a marshy area. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person discovered the body of a pregnant woman on the east side of the bay shore, about a mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies were indeed those of Lassie and her unborn son, Connor. Lassie and Connor were laid to rest at Burwood Cemetery. The autopsy revealed disturbing evidence. The baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape around his neck and a significant cut on his body. Lassie's autopsy showed even more brutal injuries. 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso hollowed out with internal organs removed, and she was missing her head and limbs. The medical examiner concluded that the baby died in the womb and was expelled from Lassie's body after her death. Investigators from the FBI and Modesto Police Department searched the home of Scott and Lassie, looking for evidence of their involvement in her disappearance. The search turned up several crucial clues, including a hair found in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. After analyzing the hair, the FBI matched it to Lassie's DNA. In addition to the home search, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse, seeking any evidence linking him to Lassie's disappearance. The FBI searched Scott's boat and found a homemade anchor that he claimed was made from a 90-pound bag of concrete, which he had used to repair his driveway. However, the prosecution believed that Scott had created multiple anchors and used 4 of them to weigh down Lassie's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies found in the bay were later identified as Lassie and Connor. leading to Scott's arrest near a golf course. Notably, Scott's appearance had changed significantly. His dark brown hair was now blonde. When arrested, Scott's vehicle was found to be packed with various items, including a large sum of cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. The police also discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. Scott's father offered an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's possession. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at a golf course. As for why Scott's car was packed, his father claimed it was because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media, who were camping outside his house at the time. Scott's trial began in June 2004, a year after his arrest. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, arguing that Scott had killed Lassie because of his affair with Amber Frey. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Lassie's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Scott initially told the police he was fishing on the day Lassie went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also noted that Scott asked the police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Lassie was supposed to walk their dog, implying that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense team presented a strong argument in court, highlighting that Scott's history of infidelity did not necessarily prove he was guilty of murdering his wife. They reasoned that Scott would not give up his life for someone he had only dated 4 times. The defense suggested that Lassie's hair might have been found in Scott's boat because she had visited the marina with him before. During the trial, 2 of Lassie's relatives testified that Scott showed no emotional response when his pregnant wife went missing. New evidence emerged when a realtor testified that Scott tried to sell their home in January, a month after Lassie's disappearance. Additionally, a salesman revealed that Scott traded in Lassie's car after she vanished. The prosecution viewed these events as incriminating evidence against Scott. Amber Frey, Scott's mistress, took the stand and shared details of their affair. The jury listened to secret recordings of Amber's phone calls with Scott, including one where he lied about being in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and tide expert testified that it was possible for Lassie's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to be fishing on the day Lassie went missing. However, the defense team argued that there was a lack of credible evidence directly linking Scott to the crime. Their theory was that someone had kidnapped Lassie on Christmas Eve 2002, holding her captive until she gave birth to Connor, and then disposing of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. The defense attorney emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to connect Scott directly to the crime, and that other suspects could have been responsible. A significant issue arose during the trial when a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Additionally, the foreman of the jury asked to be removed, and it was determined that his removal was necessary to ensure a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 murder counts: first-degree murder for killing his wife Lassie, and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son Connor. The charge of first-degree murder for Lassie's killing carried special circumstances because of the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial entered the penalty phase to determine his punishment. In this phase, the jury considered various factors, including Scott's prior criminal history, circumstances that aggravated the crime, and circumstances that mitigated it. The jury unanimously agreed that Scott should receive the death penalty. After reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the jury's verdict. He concluded that Lassie's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous, which led to Scott being sentenced to death. As is automatic in such cases, the sentence was appealed, and the California Supreme Court heard the case in June 2020. During the appeal, Scott's lawyers presented several arguments. They claimed that some potential jurors were unfairly dismissed, that 2 jurors were improperly allowed onto Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been moved to a different county due to biased questionnaire results, which showed that almost half of the potential jurors thought Scott was guilty before the trial even started. The state countered that there was no evidence to support the claim that any juror was unfairly dismissed, and that none of the 12 jurors who ultimately decided Scott's fate were biased. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction, but overturned his death sentence. In 2004, a judge resentenced Scott to life in prison without parole, which led to his transfer from San Quentin State Prison to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Around the same time, on April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, UVVA, into law. Lassie's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony. Lassie and Connor's law was designed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases where their mothers were victims of violence. The legislation recognizes the unborn child as a separate legal entity from their mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child during an attack on a pregnant woman. The law acknowledges that an unborn child is a victim of violence and deserves the same rights and protections as any other human being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chris Watts. Shanann Rzucek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shanann and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her co-worker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shanann and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shanann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shanann or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shanann hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shanann might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shanann and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shanann during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shanann, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shanann. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shanann and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shanann was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shanann emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had two part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, the severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police was skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger." But unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too. Love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh attempted to follow in his family's footsteps by pursuing a law degree from the University of North Carolina, where he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Branton. They started dating in 1991 and got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex joined his family's law firm, PMPD, as a personal injury attorney, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, unlike his ancestors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, covering up financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, Alex's dishonest dealings went unnoticed until his youngest son, Paul, was involved in a fatal boating accident. This incident was the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Murdaugh family, leading people to speculate that these accidents were not coincidental and were instead part of a larger cover-up, given the family's history and resources. Here's what happened on February 23, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, fresh out of high school, took his family's boat to Pucas Island for a party with friends. The group, including his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, and Miley Allman, wanted an unsupervised night of fun. They planned a house party and oyster roast on the island. To make the night complete, Paul used his older brother's ID to buy beer and hard liquor. They left the Murdaugh River House around 7 p.m. and continued partying until midnight. Feeling restless, Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and his friend Connor had 2 rounds of shots at around 1 a.m. As they headed back to the boat, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. Paul, who was heavily intoxicated, started acting strangely on a boat ride with friends. At 1:15 a.m., the group got back on the water, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Paul drove the boat in circles, showing signs of intoxication, and got into an argument with the others. Anthony wanted to get out on a nearby rock, but Paul refused. GPS footage later showed that the boat's speed increased at some point. Although Paul denied deliberately speeding up, he was in control of the wheel. The boat crashed into Arrow Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., throwing Mallory into the water. The others were severely injured. Connor broke his jaw, and Morgan's hand was badly hurt. Connor called 911, and help arrived soon after. When the deputy sheriff arrived, he saw blood in the main compartment and a large split in the hull from the impact. All the teenagers involved were extremely drunk, and everyone except Anthony required hospital treatment. Paul refused treatment despite being extremely agitated and having a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly higher than the legal limit. The search for Mallory's body took 8 days, and she was found to have died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitnesses stating that Paul was out of control while driving the boat, he was not arrested or charged. This led to rumors that Alex Murdaugh had used his influence to protect his son from justice. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was served with a wrongful death lawsuit. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware that her son was drunk when they went boating, and that Buster had helped them obtain fake IDs to buy alcohol. Paul was finally charged with 3 felonies on April 18, 2019, but he never made it to court because he died before his trial. A series of mysterious deaths have been linked to the Murdaugh family. One incident involved Stephen Smith, a gay teenager, who was found dead on July 8, 2015. His official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and it was initially ruled a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime. There were rumors that Stephen was in a relationship with Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, and that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper, died on February 26, 2018, due to complications from a severe head injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs had caused her to trip and fall, but there was no autopsy to confirm this account. The case was reopened on March 22, 2023, and it was revealed that Gloria's death was actually a murder, although no suspects have been named. Alex Murdaugh's family was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit after his housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, died in 2018. The lawsuit resulted in a $4.3 million insurance policy settlement, but the money never reached Satterfield's sons. Instead, Murdaugh allegedly conspired with his friend Corey Fleming, a lawyer and godfather to one of Murdaugh's sons, to steal the payout. The money was diverted to Murdaugh's bank account, and the Satterfield family was never notified. Satterfield's sons filed a new civil lawsuit against Murdaugh in September 2021. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Satterfield's death, citing inconsistencies in the coroner's report. The Satterfield family allowed authorities to exhume Satterfield's body for further investigation. Meanwhile, Murdaugh was facing numerous financial and embezzlement charges. He was allegedly involved in a money laundering and painkiller ring with his distant cousin Curtis Smith, which lasted from 2013 to 2021. On September 4, 2021, Murdaugh orchestrated a scheme in which Smith shot him in an attempt to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. However, the bullet only caused superficial injuries, and Murdaugh was able to call 911 himself. Days later, Murdaugh confessed to the scheme and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. He surrendered himself and was taken into custody. 2 days later, he announced his resignation from his family's law firm and entered rehab. However, it was soon revealed that Murdaugh had misappropriated $792,000 from his law firm. His law license was indefinitely suspended in September 2021. Investigators continued to uncover numerous financial crimes, tax evasions, and embezzlements committed by Murdaugh. After leaving rehab, Murdaugh was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. He was denied bond and later indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing money from clients, lawyers, and the Satterfield family. Alex Murdaugh faced additional charges on December 9, 2021, with 21 new counts added to the existing 27, bringing the total to 48. The charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, breach of trust, and obtaining signature or property by false pretenses. It was estimated that Murdaugh had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into his business dealings took months, with new charges emerging almost daily. By June 2022, the charges against him had risen to 81, and by the time he was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. One of the victims' mothers filed a legal claim against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh, raising questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Could he be hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? What could have been his motive? The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLAD, revisited the double murder case, considering new information gathered during the investigation into Murdaugh's financial crimes. They discovered that Alex and Maggie Murdaugh's marriage was troubled, and Maggie was living apart from her husband at their beach home on Edisto Island. Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, told law enforcement that Maggie had not planned to see Alex on the night of the murders. Alex had asked Maggie to meet him at the family's hunting lodge, where she and her younger son were later found shot dead near the dog kennels. Alex claimed to have taken a long nap before leaving to visit his ailing mother, who suffered from dementia. He stated that he was away for 45 minutes to an hour and a half and found his wife and son dead upon his return. However, law enforcement suspected that Alex's timeline was questionable and lacked a clear motive for the murders. The investigation revealed that weeks before the murder, the state grand jury had subpoenaed Alex Murdaugh's finances, which threatened to expose his financial wrongdoings. Additionally, his law firm had discovered his misappropriation of company funds, and he was confronted about it on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities believed that the financial pressure had pushed Alex to hatch a plan to divert attention from his crimes and garner sympathy in the public eye. 13 months after the fatal shooting, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The prosecutor alleged that Murdaugh had shot and killed his wife and son at close range with a shotgun and an AR-style rifle. The murder weapons were never found. Murdaugh's defense team argued that 2 shooters were involved due to the different weapons used. Expert witness testimony suggested that the shooter was likely between 5'2" and 5'4" tall, which ruled out Alex Murdaugh as a suspect due to his 6'4" height. However, under cross-examination, the expert admitted that there were other possible explanations for the bullet trajectory beyond the shooter's height. The investigation revealed that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout ammunition from an AR-style rifle, and a box of this ammo was found at the Murdaugh family estate. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid accountability for his financial crimes. Alex's lawyers countered that this didn't make sense, as it would only shift attention to himself and put him in the spotlight of a murder investigation. Alex was a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but his lawyer claimed he had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murders and no motive to kill his family. Prosecutors presented 2 videos taken on the night of the murder, which appeared to show Alex wearing different shirts. The Snapchat video taken from Paul's phone showed Alex wearing a blue shirt, while the body cam footage showed him wearing a different shirt. Investigators couldn't find the blue shirt, and prosecutors suggested Alex tried to influence a key witness's account of what he was wearing. Cell phone data and testimony from Alex's mother's caregiver confirmed that Alex was only at his mother's home for 15 to 20 minutes, contradicting his claim of staying for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The most crucial piece of evidence was a video found on Paul's phone, recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders. The video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex, placing Alex at the scene of the crime. This contradicted his previous alibi and confirmed his presence at the dog kennels where the murders occurred. Alex testified that he didn't shoot his wife or son, but admitted to lying about his alibi. Alex Murdaugh changed his story, claiming that his opioid addiction and resulting paranoia led him to lie to law enforcement. However, prosecutors argued that Murdaugh fabricated this excuse after murdering his wife and son. They believed he used his wife's phone to create an alibi by making calls and sending texts, including "Call me, babe," at 9:47 p.m. Phone data showed that Murdaugh's and his wife's phones locked simultaneously, and Alex's phone recorded a sudden increase in steps around the time of the murder. Prosecutors suggested this was evidence of him trying to hide or dispose of evidence, but his lawyers disputed this, pointing out that the step patterns on Alex's phone did not match his wife's. The decisive evidence came from a video recorded at the dog kennels. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found Murdaugh guilty on all counts on March 2, 2023. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Additionally, he received a 5-year sentence for possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Murdaugh pleaded guilty to 22 financial crimes as part of a deal, but maintains his innocence in the murders. He appealed his conviction on March 9, 2023. In a surprise move, his lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, alleging that Rebecca Hill, a court clerk, had engaged in jury tampering. Hill denies the allegations, which include advising jurors to disregard Murdaugh's testimony and other defense evidence, pressuring them to reach a quick guilty verdict, and misrepresenting critical information to the trial judge. A hearing is scheduled for Murdaugh's lawyers to present evidence and witnesses to support their claim. However, a judge has not yet been assigned to preside over the hearing. With over 100 financial and drug crime charges pending, as well as multiple lawsuits, it is clear that the Alex Murdaugh case is far from over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, and later moved to Cedar City, Utah, with his family after his father finished dental school. As a child, Michael was very active and enjoyed playing sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He also excelled in school and achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska for the summer, where he quickly proved himself as a leader, rising to the position of line manager and overseeing a team of over a dozen men. This experience showcased his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then embarked on a mission trip to South Brazil with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which deepened his faith and commitment to his religious community. When he returned to the United States, he pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love. They got married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, often spending quality time with his family at sports events, school concerts, and working on projects together in the garage. On January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery was made at the Haight residence in Enoch. 8 bodies were found, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned. The events leading up to this gruesome finding began when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work. Their concerned colleagues contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door but received no response. As they surveyed the property, it seemed empty. Considering the Haights had 5 children, the police reached out to the Iron County School District to check if any of the kids were in school that day. However, it was found that none of the children were present. Before entering the home, the police cleared the premises to ensure it was safe to do so. After a thorough search, authorities confirmed that no one required medical attention and there was no active threat. The Haight's single-story residence with a basement was declared a crime scene, and detectives arrived shortly after. In the main bedroom, detectives found 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach, his head turned to the left, with one arm under his head on a pillow and a blanket covering part of his body. Tasha, Gavin's mother, was also partially covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, detectives found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head resting on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, similar to her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the 12-year-old girl was found lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Aman's room, a 7-year-old boy was found lying face down in the corner, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, with her head on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, with her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. In the exercise room of the basement, the detectives found Michael Haight lying on top of a sleeping bag. Sadly, all 8 family members were found dead from gunshot wounds. It quickly became clear to the detectives that Michael Haight was the main suspect, and they believed he had killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. When detectives started investigating, a neighbor provided vital information that helped them reconstruct the crime's timeline. The neighbor told police she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as she left her room, heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, realizing it was after the allowed date for fireworks in the neighborhood, she felt annoyed rather than alarmed by the noise. The neighbor reported hearing an initial loud bang, followed by 2 more in quick succession, then a short pause, another bang, and a longer pause before the final bang. Based on this testimony and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective inferred that the loud noises heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events that unfolded that night, leading them to believe that Michael Haight committed the brutal killings during this time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives discovered a 2020 report from an unnamed individual who had notified the Utah Division of Child and Family Services about abuse in the Haight household. According to the report, 14-year-old Macy had confided in this individual about her fear of her father, sparking a further investigation. The authorities then interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she revealed disturbing information. Her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she lived in fear of being killed by him. She reported that the violent attacks began in 2017 and recounted an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. Michael Haight denied hurting his daughter when questioned by detectives, passing off the incidents as misunderstandings and attributing his emotional state to his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He claimed to have taken out his frustrations on his older daughter. Despite this, Tasha chose not to press charges, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to pursue the case, as it did not meet the legal requirements for prosecution. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which indicated that her relationship with Michael was not life-threatening. As a result, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months. Further investigation revealed a different side of Michael, unknown to the community. According to Tasha's friends, they had to speak quietly or turn on the kitchen water when visiting Tasha, as they suspected Michael was monitoring and eavesdropping on their conversations. Tasha's friends would often help her clean the house when they visited, which prevented Michael from finding fault with her. When texting Tasha, her friends noticed that she would respond with brief, positive messages, likely to maintain a positive image in case Michael read them. This suggested that everything was fine in their marriage. The detectives investigating the case discovered that Michael exhibited highly controlling behavior towards Tasha. For instance, he would take away her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Another red flag was his overreaction when Tasha bought a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a dirty one, which was a legitimate need. Michael's anger was unwarranted, and he claimed the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Aman, was increasingly imitating Michael's bad behavior. When Tasha gave Aman instructions, he would respond, "That's not my job," which concerned Tasha as it showed his lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Tasha's friends reported that in 2022, Tasha attempted to prioritize her own well-being by getting her nails done, a rare treat for her given her many responsibilities. However, her husband Michael refused to let her do so, imposing strict limits on her autonomy and freedom. Moreover, Michael frequently disregarded or ignored Tasha's instructions, and their friend Aman often followed his lead in doing so. Tasha felt more confident in her appearance after indulging herself, and she decided to get her nails done every month. However, Michael was unhappy about this decision and expressed his disapproval, worried about the cost. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 per month, but Michael was unconvinced, arguing that the money could be better spent on their children. Michael's reaction was rooted in his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight, which had been a sensitive topic for her since Michael had often called her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael became furious and accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to explain the sudden change in her appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalated as he tried to manipulate Tasha's weight loss, pleading with her to stop losing weight because he was worried that other men might find her attractive. This demand was driven by his own insecurities and desire for complete control over Tasha's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about an incident where the kitchen table broke and Tasha needed to buy a new one. However, Michael refused to give her the money, further demonstrating his controlling behavior. Tasha was fed up with the old table and decided to take initiative by refinishing it to make it look better and more functional. However, Michael was unhappy with her decision because she didn't ask for his permission first. Michael was extremely frugal during the holiday season, despite earning a good income. He only gave Tasha $100 for each of their 5 children to buy presents, which was not enough in Tasha's opinion. Tasha always made sure her children had a wonderful Christmas, but Michael refused to provide more funds, claiming that he worked hard for his money and saw no reason to give more to his family. He believed that his income was rightfully his alone. Michael's passion for reducing waste and conserving resources led him to implement strict rules on household habits. He forced Tasha to wash and reuse plastic bags, even if they had been used only once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags added to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling burdened and overwhelmed. Michael's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Tasha's life, including her daily routines. For instance, he demanded that she use baby wipes for cleaning, claiming it was better for the environment and more cost-effective. However, this requirement caused Tasha discomfort, hygiene issues, and unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to follow Michael's instructions, she would face severe consequences, which he made clear would lead to serious trouble. This threat instilled fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her no choice but to obey Michael's demands. Tasha confided in her friends that while Michael had been cruel to her throughout their marriage, he had never directed this cruelty towards their children until the late 2010s. However, over time, the abuse towards their daughter Macy escalated, driving her to consider suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for his daughter Macy, demanding she earn perfect grades despite her struggles, which were exacerbated by the emotional burden of his abusive behavior. This pressure was crushing for Macy. Macy's friends shared a disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael returned home to find Macy comforted by her mother. He became enraged and ordered Macy to clean her room. This event left Macy deeply disturbed, remembering the hatred and evil she saw in her father's eyes. The detectives also discovered an incident where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael while playing with a changing table. Michael responded by blaming his wife Tasha for their children's behavior, calling them the worst and most disrespectful in the world. He then humiliated Tasha, calling her fat and ugly in front of their 5 children. This painful incident prompted Tasha to plan her escape and file for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Tasha realized she had to leave her husband Michael after witnessing his abusive behavior and lack of self-control. She knew staying in the marriage would negatively impact her children, and their well-being was more important than her marital commitment. In December 2022, Tasha filed for divorce, but asked for the papers to be delivered after Christmas to give her children one last normal holiday before the separation. When Michael received the papers, he tried to act normal, but Tasha saw through it. He told her to leave the children behind, but she refused, taking them to her mother's home in Lynn, Utah. Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, trying to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him, but she refused, sensing danger. After filing for divorce, Tasha's mother moved in to support her and the children. However, Michael's actions worsened the situation. He refused to leave the family home, instead moving into the basement. Tasha discovered he had secretly transferred $220,000 from their children's savings accounts without her knowledge or consent. She also found that her inherited firearms were missing, leaving her family vulnerable. The couple's children, Macy and Briley, were affected by the constant drama at home. Macy had a secret phone to record her father's outbursts as evidence for the divorce, while Briley found solace at a neighbor's house. Both girls were relieved about their parents' divorce. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney, expressing concerns about her divorce and Michael's volatile behavior. Although she had relocated him to the basement, the attorneys pressed her about feeling safe. Tasha reassured them she never feared for her or her children's well-being, but in hindsight, her optimism was tragically misplaced. A disturbing discovery emerged from the digital evidence found on the family's computers and cell phones. Just days before the tragic shooting, Michael made a series of concerning Google searches on December 30th at 10:41 p.m. These searches focused on firearms and shooting-related topics, revealing his sinister intentions. The search results showed Michael had asked alarming questions, such as the loudness of a 9mm gunshot and what a gunshot sounds like. Before taking his own life, Michael wrote a note expressing his desire to end the controlling behavior he felt he was subjected to by his wife. He stated that he couldn't handle the situation for another day and wanted to escape the manipulation. Michael's note conveyed deep frustration and desperation, as he repeatedly asked for help but felt ignored. He emphasized his determination not to be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated, as he carefully planned the murders to catch his wife and children off guard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children, Jackson and Skylar, seemed like a typical family. Skylar was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Skylar was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Skylar started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Skylar experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Skylar shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Skylar with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Skylar picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Skylar that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Skylar was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Skylar regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OB/GYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Skylar, the patient, into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Skylar her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Skylar had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Skylar admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7th, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Skylar had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Skylar had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Skylar revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Skylar vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. The police suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Skylar suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Skylar confessed to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skylar was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skylar became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skylar gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skylar's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. Throughout this period, Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skylar's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skylar's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skylar's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skylar faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skylar remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal. If Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skylar's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skylar turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skylar went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skylar sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skylar was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skylar sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited," and "I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skylar was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skylar had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skylar's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skylar. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skylar's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skylar during the trial. Skylar's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skylar's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skylar's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skylar tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skylar's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, she had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skylar's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skylar only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skylar's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skylar did not harm the baby. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skylar has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skylar remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a